Good evening, everyone. I'm Angela Jardine, the Chair of the Education Workforce Council in Wales, and tonight's event will be conducted bilingually. So if your chosen language is English, please click on the globe icon across the menu bar at the bottom and select the English option. This should allow you to follow proceedings if English is your preferred language. Felly, heb oedi bellach, ga i ddymuno croeso cynnes iawn i chi gyd, a mae'n bleser mawr gael eich cymru heno yn ein darlith blynyddol unwaith eto. Gallwch chi gymeryd rhan ar drydar o ddefnyddio'r hashnod siarad prof 22 neu trwy'r chat function yng ngwaelod eich sgrin, a dyn ni yn awyddus iawn i gael eich adborth ac i chi roed eich sylwabau neu cwestiynau ar gyfer yr athro i mewn yn y chat bar. Mae Cyngor y Gweithlu Addysg yn ddiolchgar iawn i'n partneriaid Prifysgol Abertawe, yn enwedig yr athro Alma Harris am ei chydweithrediad ac am sicrhau bod ein siaradwr pwysig, yr athro Yong Zhao, yma hefo ni heno. Tonight's event is being live streamed via YouTube and will also be recorded, so it will be available via the EWC website at the end of the presentation. So it gives me great pleasure, therefore, to hand you over to Professor Harris to introduce our esteemed guest. Alma, over to you.
Thank you, Angela. And first of all, to thank the EWC and Swansea University for yet another fantastic event. You'll see from the adverts earlier, there are more wonderful events coming, but this is a real privilege to be able to introduce my friend and colleague, Yong Zhao. It's hard to introduce Yong because we go back a long way, probably far too long, Yong, in the annals of time. And he's been a very good friend, a good colleague, and we've written together and we've been at conferences together. So it's a huge privilege to welcome you to Wales. Yong is a prolific author, and he has the title of a book that I wish that I thought of this title. It's actually called Who is Afraid of the Big Bad Wolf? And it's about China, its education systems for good or for ill. But one word I would use to describe Yong is actually unafraid. He is a public intellectual, one of the top 10 people in education in the USA, informing policy, not just in the USA, but globally. So he is someone to be listened to. But the thing I like about Yong, apart from his great titles of his books and his writing, is he's not afraid to speak truth to power. And in his writing and in his work, and as you'll hear this evening, he does that very eloquently. He does that with humor, but also he does it with humility. Because the one thing I know about Yong is he's always prepared to listen and always prepared to learn. So it is a pleasure to listen to you again, my friend, Yong Zhao, and thank you for being in Wales. Croeso Cymru, and thank you for your lecture this evening. We all look forward to hearing what you have to say. Diolch yn fawr, and a huge, huge, warm Welsh welcome.
Thank you, Professor Harris and Alma. You know, you and I definitely go back a long time. And thanks for giving me the opportunity to share some of my thoughts in education. And thanks to EWC and all the Swansea University, and all of you have organized this. This is it's quite amazing to me that I am right now in Oregon in the US and have a chance to talk to you. It's of course, I wish I could be in Wales right now and to enjoy your great culture and a great place. And before I get started, I was just trying to share with you, this is my 30th year in the US. I came to the US 1992 from China. And of all the times, all these 30 years, I've discovered myself working in many different contexts, including when Professor Alma Harris was in Warwick University. I was there, and I lived in the UK for half a year. I've done a lot. Right now, I have a split job appointment. In a half a year, I worked for the University of Melbourne in Australia, another half year for the University of Kansas in the US. And so all my experiences over the past 30 some years really have taught me a lot. I've learned a lot from my colleagues, my friends in different countries, from teachers and students in different countries, and also have been able to really have access to all sorts of data, all sorts of evidence. So what today I want to share with you is really a strong message about what I've learned all these years. The big thing of what I've learned is really about students, about what we do with our children. And I believe all the people in the audience are interested in this topic. You know, we've been talking a lot about the future of children. So, you know, one of the very common phrases in education is to say, get your children ready for the future. Get your children ready for the future. I said, you know, is that true? Do we have a certain future waiting for our children to be ready for, or do we have to create a context in which we help our children to be better prepared to create the future? Our children are creators of the future. And this is one of the reasons when I go around, students often ask me, so why do you care about education here and there? And I said, you know, one of the things I want to have is a good retirement. And children are our retirement. And children create our retirement. And a peaceful and prosperous retirement is what I want. So I want all children to be well educated. I want all children to be very well prepared, not for the future, but to create a future. And what we did today in our schools, what we do today in our homes, prepare our children to be a creator of the future. And their future is not, or does not have to be what we have today or what we have in the past. So please feel free to follow me on Twitter or check out my blog, you know, on my website, you know. So today I want to really start with something quite disappointing that was released last November or December in the US. This is a very interesting piece of data. And if you look at this, this is reading scores and math scores. In the US, there's some low stakes test. It's called NAEP, National Assessment of Education Progress. It's called the nation's report card. And they've done some long-term tracking of data. So if you look at this website, I mean, this data, you will see that since 1971, compare 1971 to 2020, you see some progress. But the points, there are hundreds of points, just 12 points and 5 points, you know, different ages. That is the, you know, over the past 50 years, the progress is very limited. Then you compare to 2012 to 2020, there was actually a drop in the scores. So what does this really mean? This things is that over the past 50 some years, despite all the education reforms, despite all the changes to our schools, despite all the educational research, despite all the educational innovations, I'm sure many of you, if you are a teacher, you're seeing so-called innovations, professional development all the time. Despite all these efforts, the quality of education does not seem to have improved much. And this is a very basic data. It's really about reading and math for children age 9 and age 13. I am not sure this necessarily applies to the situation in Wales or in the UK, but I've seen similar data from Australia. The Australian NAPLAN data, the National Assessment of Literacy and Numeracy, showed since it was developed, I mean, the test was developed, there was no progress. There was no improvement. So I was just wondering how we want to interpret this data. And, you know, we have played with the curriculum every few years. We try to develop a new curriculum. We've played with teachers. We have different accountability for teachers. We've played with assessment. We've played practically every doable aspect. But there are, of course, many things we have not played with. You know, for example, students. We have not enabled our students to be an owner of their own learning or to be a partner of educational change. So what I would like to really talk about today is really about students. The second thing is about assessment. So the first thing I want you to invite you to think about the students we have in our schools. Very often in education reforms, we treat them as the same. We treat them as passive recipients of what we want to teach them. But the fact is that human nature is different. What we have as human natures, this is an important message for us to think about. In a human, who are you? Who are our children? And when they come to school, what do they have? So there are about three things I think that matter in our children. Number one is that we got to think about our children as natural born learners. That our children naturally, when they are born, they are learners. We're not like fish. Fish just need to be born and grow up, and then all the knowledge of living in the water seems to be within their body. But evolution has taught human beings something different. That is the capacity to invent, to recreate, to construct a new life. And that is the process of learning. The fundamental things of real learning is invention. We create new ways of doing things. So if a person is not allowed to learn, life really stops. Can we help our children to learn all the time? The second point is that we're naturally diverse learners. We're different. Our children are different. And they differ by nature and they differ by nurture. That is, they are born to have different capacities and they have different social experiences. There is a great book, actually, this is a British book, was really interesting. This is many years ago now. I was reading, it's called Nature via Nurture. That is to say, human beings, what makes us today, what makes every one of our students unique today is both what they're born with and how they experience. And the random interactions between those two things, what you are born with and what you experience. Just let's imagine you got some potatoes. You know, potatoes have natural, you know, DNA. You know, if you plant potatoes, and you will get potatoes in many ways. But let's think about this: a potato without air, without nutrition, without temperature, probably will not grow into that. So your DNA might not even be triggered without the right conditions. But then think about this. No matter what conditions you have, you cannot change potatoes into apple trees or orange trees. So what you're born with constrains what you can be, but at the same time provides the opportunities for you to become what you can be. And your experience, your family experience, your school experience, your community experience can facilitate facilitate what you can become and can suppress what you can become. So this is in education, we've been having this fight for a long time. On the one hand, we have people say, oh, it's nature. That is what you are born with, what determines who you can be. You know, in psychology, that's why we try to measure IQ, your intelligence. We try to measure your body. We try to measure personality. We believe that will drive you. But then in education, we have this belief that, you know, we can teach you anything. You know, teachers, we like to believe that, you know, of course, yes, you can teach anything to anybody. But then you have to consider, if you're teaching something to someone who is good at that and who is interested in that, they'll become great. If not, yes, you can teach them, but it's very difficult for you to change nature. So for example, yeah, we can teach everybody how to paint. We can teach everyone how to draw, how to paint, how to be an artist. But you cannot force everybody or teach everybody to become a Picasso. That's not possible. So let's consider that. This is really important to think about this. You know, we have some good evidence. Howard Gardner of Harvard University in 1980s proposed the idea that human beings are talented in different ways. This is called multiple intelligence theory. Multiple intelligence. That you can be, I mean, he has different categories. I mean, I don't necessarily have to agree with all the categories, but you can think about it. He will say, somebody is talented in music. That is, when you're born, you have a more slight tendency to enjoy rhythm, to enjoy patterns, to enjoy music. And some others may be organized with visualizing the world in 3D, spatial recognition. Others may be in math, you know, logical, mathematical. Other people may be in language, in different ways. Let's think about this. So you're born with this talent, but if you have no experience to trigger that talent, that may never exist. I have always thought I could have become a Justin Bieber of Canada, but I met in a village. When I was born in China, I never had access to music. So I don't know. I've never tried music. So I could have been talented in music, but I never tried. So lack of that experience basically stopped me in exploring what music could mean to me. Now, education can do a lot of those things. If you think about our schools, what do we value? What do we offer? What do we support our children to develop? If you just look at the simple map here, the simple thing here, we probably provide reading, math, and science, but we are not really endorsing all the other potential talents. Remember, our human talents are much more than what I presented here. So let's first then think about, are we teaching to our children's strength? Are we supporting the development of their talent? Are we helping them to become unique and great in their own ways? Apparently not. Our curriculum, our academic curriculum, teaches what we think might be useful to help children to be ready for the future, but not necessarily what they are good at. Human beings are different in many different ways. This is just one way. We think about cognitive intelligence. You can think about others, personality-wise. How are we different? You know, in personality, we have different dimensions. This is called the Big Five personality dimensions. You can imagine, I'm sure you have students, you have children in your families, that some of them are extremely outgoing. Some of them are very quiet. They're different. So with the outgoing students, of course, you can teach them, you can suppress them. They don't have to be that outgoing. And the quiet students, you can encourage them to become more active. But fundamentally, if you teach someone to be more outgoing, the outgoings might be more outgoing. And those who are born quiet can be slightly more active. So it's constraints and, at the same time, support. So think about nature and nurture. Then you can also think about, we have others, there's another kind of theory that comes out, talk about psychological desires. What do human beings want? What do they pursue? What excites them? When you think about passions. So this is about called 16 basic human desires. And that is, some people are very much interested in power. They want to influence others. They want to be the boss. And others may be more curious about something. And some people are into order. Everything has to be lined up. If you look at the American sitcom Big Bang Theory, and there's a guy who really wants everything to be organized, to be orderly, structured. Some people are interested in collecting things. So people have an interesting profile of all these qualities. But so some people may have like 80% driven by power and 20% driven by, let's say, independence. And so we have students who are born to be interested in different things. And by the way, I really want you to think about this. Think about your family. You just had Christmas and New Year, your family get together. If you understand people from what drives them, you will probably have a better life. People are different. So and then we have also different experiences. As I said before, when I was born and raised in my Chinese village, a tiny village, I had no access to music, literally no music. I don't know if I could be, any of this would be, my music talent was not developed. And perhaps in my village, in my family, they encouraged me outgoing. So I'm outgoing, but also think about interest. I think I'm driven by curiosity. I really want to know. But if you also look through all of this, how do we determine what we want to develop in schools? Schools, we have this curriculum written by adults, by governments, and we expect the curriculum is necessary for our children to have the skills, the attitudes, the perspectives, the personalities, the desires to achieve a different future. But our children, as I said before, children are different. So when we have different children coming to school to have the same curriculum, the same standardized testing, the same expectation, what happens? We have a lot of children who are not prepared to accept. Our children, after grade 3 or year 3, they began to become disengaged. They began to be driven by something else. And schools have been working very hard to give our children the homogeneous education experience, the same experience for all our children. If you are age 6, you should know this. If you're age 7, you should know this. And we expect everybody to be the same, to do the same thing, to making the same progress. And this is why education has not made great progress, despite our efforts to change them. And this is why actually in the end, what we have in everybody is we don't give them the diverse experience. We instead give all of them the same experience. So in the end, you have students who like school, you have students who hate school, you have students who pretend to be in school, and they are not necessarily trying to be themselves. What we need in our children is in essence to accept something, I would say, to accept the idea that our children have a different jagged profile. I want to explain this a little bit. So if you are so different, you're born different, different experience, come to our school, have homogeneous experience, but indeed, what our children are, they have a jagged profile. Our schools expect the same profile for all students. Everybody's good in math, everybody good reading, but we forget we actually have a jagged profile. That is, you look at these two people, one is taller, another one is shorter. One has a bigger stomach, another one did not have a big stomach. So think about our life, some will be strong in music, others will be great in art, and others may be good in math, and others may be good in creativity. So everybody is different. And we in our schools don't accept this difference. But this difference has a very strong implication. That is, can we prepare our students to follow their passion, to follow their talent, and then become great in the area they can be? Schools don't like that, because schools want to say, okay, I want you to be good in everything I want you to be good at. But that's not possible. And the schools also have another idea to say, I want you to be equally good, but we cannot be. So what I want to say this one is in here, all of us, I want to invite you to consider what you will be good at and what you will be bad at. In education, we don't like to talk about bad, but we have to accept the fact we must be bad at something in order to be good at something. We must be bad at something. I have chosen, I don't think if I've chosen or I was chosen to be bad at a lot of things. I remember when I was growing up in my little village in China, I was probably the worst farm boy in my village. I could not drive the water buffalo. I could not climb the trees. I was really bad. And luckily, that's when my father said, instead of teach you how to do farming, I will send you to school. I said, why don't you go to school? You don't end up to be the worst farmer in China. But anyway, when I was in school, actually, I discovered I was good at school stuff. I was able to read. I mean, despite the fact at that time, during the Chinese Cultural Revolution in the 1960s, 1970s, there was no direct pathway to out of the village, but I was interested in school because I was good at reading and I enjoyed that. And I soon discovered that reading was helpful. And I'm always bad at math. For a Chinese guy to be bad at math, I know that might be funny, but actually there's a lot of Chinese kids who are not good at math. But anyway, so that's why I chose to study English. I began learning English when I was 14 in a Chinese rural school, but that's a way for me to avoid failure of trying to do better at the math. So we need to think about what you're good at, what you're not good at. Now think about in education. Look at each and every one of our children. What are they good at? What are they interested in? And don't worry about their unique greatness, because if they can become great and unique, don't worry, they can find a job. They don't need to find a job. They can create a job. We live in a very different time. If for me, a guy who was born in a Chinese village, who really had nothing, who can come out to give a talk to people in Wales, I bet many people in Wales, in your country, they can achieve greatness and uniqueness. And the great and uniqueness can help them become the best creators of the future we need. So I hope you keep this in mind, just these three things: natural born learners, naturally diverse learners, and finally, naturally intentional learners. Human beings learn, but they learn for a purpose. They learn to do something meaningful to themselves and to other people, intentional. This is another reason a lot of our children lose interest in our schools, because they don't see the purpose. They don't see how the curriculum is relevant to their life. How do we do this? So think about our children. I'm hoping really through our education, we look more at who we have and how we help each individual student to grow in their own way, rather than looking at the curriculum and how to make the curriculum apply to all children. Then another point I want to share with you today, through all my learning, is the problem of assessment. The problem of assessment. You know, many times people have been talking about, we want to do education reforms because we are falling behind other countries. This is especially true in the US, in America. In the US, a lot of education reforms have been driven by saying, oh, we're losing behind Soviet Union in the 1950s. Or we're behind Japan in the 1990s. Now we're behind Singapore, you know, in 2000s. And now suddenly we're behind China. We got to go forward with this. This is actually quite silly. A nation's education should be based on the best educational ideas, not based on other countries. And plus, I have been looking at the history of international testing. You know, international tests, you know, there's TIMSS, that's TIMSS, is called Trends in International Mathematics Study. But actually TIMSS used to stand for the third International Mathematics and Science Study, the third. But because it becomes so powerful, so they changed the T from representing third into trends. And also it's another big study, it's called PISA, Program for International Student Assessment by the OECD. That's become very popular in the UK. I'm sure it's popular in Wales. So if you look at this, I discovered American education was not in decline, was not getting worse. It had always been bad. If you look at the testing, it's not getting worse, it's not getting, you know, in decline, it was very bad for a long time. Look at 1960s, the first international mathematics study. Americans 12th graders ranked 12th out of 12 countries in math. Now, if you know math, that's pretty bad. Okay, 12 out of 12 countries. And ever since then, 60s, 70s, 90s, all the time, American students have actually done better. But so they had a very bad start. However, the question you want to go back to ask, if these tests meant something, America should have been gone, because all their students were the worst in the world. I don't have time to go through all this data, but I can tell you, none of this tests made sense. And because if you look at, you know, a big question is, well, if we have so many bad students, why is America still here? The country should have gone bad. Well, maybe the test scores never mattered, because we kept talking about education as the foundation of a country. If those students were so bad in 1960s, they would have ruined this country. But this country somehow is still here. Despite, you know, we got people like Donald Trump, you know, this country is still here. You know, why did that happen? So I began to look at this data. If you look at the test scores test scores, I just picked 1 year, TIMSS data of 2003. That is, shows the students in East Asian countries like Singapore, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Japan, Korea, they've always outscored American students. But then there's another assessment. It's a survey of confidence, accompany all the studies. And then you discover, in terms of confidence, American students are always more confident. So you want to say, okay, so you're not very good, but you think you're very good. And that kind of contradictory data interest me. Because on the one hand, those countries have high scores, but the students are not confident. On the other hand, the students have low scores, but they're very confident. This is what I joke about, is to say, okay, yeah, I may be wrong, but that's how I feel. So this is very interesting. So does confidence change the whole situation? So you look at this, I'm not the only one who paid attention to this. Tom Lovelace of Brookings Institute saw the same thing. This is the data he came up with. He found that is confidence and enjoyment across different countries have a negative correlation. That is, countries with high test scores have students with less confidence, and countries with the low test scores, students have higher confidence. So this data goes on. Actually, you look at this here. There, I put down here, England, US, Australia versus East Asian countries. Look at this, the test scores, the difference is really over 100 points out of 600, in TIMSS. But then you look at this confidence level, 3% towards this. Remember, this has been changed already because of England, for example, trying to teach the Chinese math. It's kind of horrible, stupid idea, but they try to do it. And US has been saying that our kids are too confident for their own good. So we've been trying to depress their confidence and teach their scores. So look at this. This is already huge difference. And PISA, the other test, has some similar results. Look, this is the PISA data and entrepreneurship confidence. It's all negative. It's all negative. And also you look at the test, most recent data from PISA, students' satisfaction with life, students' social emotional well-being is negatively correlated with test scores on the PISA. That is, students from systems that produce high test scores enjoy schooling, enjoy their life much less than students in other countries. So here's an issue. I'm not really asking you to say, oh God, they don't have to be necessarily the same way. Okay, you don't say, okay, let's decrease our scores to get our kids happy, or get our kids happy, and their scores can go lower. That's not the point. The point is this: our test scores do not necessarily reflect what our children actually need to be a better creator for the future. Because in education, we have to think about, we have different outcomes. Education's biggest problem today in assessment is we have multiple outcomes. And in our schools, in our assessment, in our testing, we only pay attention to short-term instructional outcomes. Let's think about short-term versus long-term learning outcomes. So you teach some students to, let's remember of some mathematical facts. I can solve the math problem today, but there's no transfer. There's no real learning. So next year they come back. They've lost that. Yes, you achieved well, but then you've lost in the long run, another thing, think about reading. Yes, you can decipher the code. You can make the connection between print and reading in year 1 and year 2. But once you go to year 4 and year 5, reading is about comprehension. So if you devote all your time from year 1, year 2, to make sure children can recognize the letters, to do those things, but you've deprived them of knowledge, deprived them of interest in reading. So in the long run, it doesn't help. But in the short term, yes, you've achieved. Another thing is what I call instructional outcomes and educational outcomes. As you know today, we're in the 21st century. We want our children to be creative. We want our children to be critical thinkers. We want our children to be resilient. We have all those desires. That's what I call educational outcome. We want our children graduating with good morality, good ethics. Those are really educational outcomes that goes beyond one class, one subject. But our school assessment will often assess our instructional outcome. That is our curriculum. That is what we teach our children. They can go against each other. For example, creativity. Creativity requires confidence. Creativity requires curiosity. So if in a class you emphasize memorization, you emphasize mastering the subject, yes, you might be successful now, but you have possibly damaged the children's confidence to create. You have damaged their interest in knowing. And of course, we have cognitive versus non-cognitive. For example, yes, I can do this, but I don't want to do this. Yes, I can pass this test, but really I'm not interested in this test. So what are we doing to help our children to want to do certain things, following their passion versus the outcomes that they can do this? Then, of course, we have different contexts and different outcomes. That is, in different places, when you teach different things, children may be open to what you want to teach them, or they may be against that. So this idea about assessment outcomes help us to rethink what matters. I hope as educators, as teachers, again, let's not pay so much attention to so-called assessment. Let's look at our own judgment of if our children are growing, are developing their talent, and follow their passions, and discover what they can do. Then we need to think about what we have just experienced and what we are experiencing now, COVID. I want all of us to come to think about how we have come to a point, to a human experience that everybody has just had and still experiencing, COVID. COVID-19 has truly changed education, and we can change more. There are several things we need to think about. First of all, it is a universal experiment. COVID is a sad experiment. It disrupted a lot of things. Educational reformers have been trying to disrupt education, but not very successful. But COVID has. COVID has forced all of us to try remote learning, to make adjustment really fast, to force parents and teachers to deliver education in different ways, and to force students to learn in different manners. We have been learning without being together. All teachers experimented with the remote learning using technology. We have some of our traditional practices that have been suspended. Like in the United States, for example, many universities said, we don't want to take the standardized test score anymore. SAT and ACT have become optional. And many countries have stopped standardized testing. And policies governing schools have been changed. So there's a lot of things we need to rethink about this. And also today, our children have a lot more access to technology. Parents are getting used to their children learning from technology. We have created a global learning ecosystem. We have created a lot of resources online. And children have piloted, have tried to participate in global learning experiences, to interact with others. So here's what I would like to suggest in education. I've written several books on this issue. One is about the future of education. I wrote actually before the pandemic. It's called Reach for Greatness. We don't need, as I argue in this book, we don't need personalized education. Personalized education is done to children. We need a personalizable education. That education can be constructed by students. Our curriculum, our facilities, our classrooms, our teachers, our resources are there to support our children to personalize learning based on their interest, based on their strength, so they can become creative and entrepreneurial people to create a better future. And I've also recently, during the COVID, I wrote another book. It's called Learners Without Borders. In this book, I made a strong argument about today we should not be thinking about learning as being constrained by the classroom or by the curriculum. Our children can learn from YouTube, can learn from peer tutoring, can learn from people in Japan or China, Australia, or other countries, and they can learn from other people. They can learn with other people, and they can learn for other people. They need to create value for others. Another book I wrote is written with a colleague, Mike Weimer, is about self-determined learners. How our children have to have the autonomy to make decisions. They have to have choices. They have to be able to control their learning and not learning being controlled by others. And they have to use their learning to build relationships for others. So my view of the future of education is this. Can we think about every student as great and unique based on their past, based on their nature, based on their experiences, and help them find what they're passionate about, and then allow them to use their creative and entrepreneurial spirit to create something valuable for others. Can we do that? If every child in our school is great and unique and is interested in something, and then they create something valuable for other people, I think our schools, we have failed that. We have not enabled our children to learn to serve others, to use what they know, to use what they're passionate, to create value for others. So this is what I call three basic things in education. First one is called personalization. That is, our children can follow their interest, can enhance their strength through an education that's personalizable, that we would allow our children to own their own learning. We would allow our children to work with us. So in this case, teachers need to change their roles. Teachers will become personal consultants. That is, you understand your child, you know who they are, and then you create opportunities for them. The second point is teaching, is what I call product-oriented. It's beyond project-based. The idea is to enable every child to start by asking a question, to identifying problems worth solving. In our schools, we talk about problem-solving skills. I don't think that's nearly as important as problem identification. Yes, you may know how to solve a problem, but do you know which problem is worth solving? So that is our children become problem oriented from first grade on to say, how can I help others? You know, we always ask a question. Yes, you're good at that, but who cares? You're good at that because you can solve problems for others. That's the orientation we need to have. And our education today, in order to get the resources, get the support, we need to be globally connected. Our children can, as I said, learn from anyone globally. They can learn with anyone globally. They can be in the same class in global schools. They can also create value for people in other countries. Your students can create maybe Welsh schools for other countries. Your students can create English lessons for other students, and of course, vice versa. So that is what I have planned to share with you. And the basic idea is very simple. That is, learning today is different from 50 years ago. Our education assessment does not capture that. Our schools today, by and large, do not recognize the importance of students' responsibilities, students' talents, and possible ways our students can make a contribution in other people's lives. We are not locking our students up for 12 years. We should create a world, a context in which our children can exercise who they are, our children can practice who they are, our children can discover who they are, therefore they need to become owners of their own learning, and they need to become partners of educational change. Thank you.
Well, thank you very, very much. Lots of thought-provoking ideas in there, and we have been collecting questions as we've been going through. You'll be unsurprised to hear. So hopefully you'll be willing to take as many of those as possible between now and our planned end time. Are you happy for me to begin with the first of those?
Yeah, sure.
Great, thank you so much. The first question I've got for you is regarding, do you think there'd be more benefits to particular groups from schools placing a greater emphasis upon self-directed learning and independence, but especially including more socially disadvantaged students?
I would say, yeah, schools always serve different groups of students. And one of the things I think that disadvantaged students, they actually probably need different types of education. We have a very deficit view of children. It's, oh, you are from poor family, immigrant family, minority family, you will need to be taught more. I think the opposite needs to happen. We need to give them different opportunities so they can discover, they can explore their strength and passions, and we need to find opportunities for them to make a difference. There are always students who want to go to Oxbridge, and there are always students who want to do this and do that. But what I don't want a school to go one way or another. We need just to work with our students, not so much with the curriculum. I think the curriculum idea is really going to change, because right now we have a curriculum prescribed all our children. In my proposal, I would say maybe 30% of the time can be devoted to teach a common curriculum for all people, because tax dollars needs to support common education, and every student needs some of the basic knowledge, basic skills to survive in the country, or to know the government, all those things. But that's very little. That's what I call floor curriculum, floor expectation. What we need is our children pursuing a personalized learning approach. And how can we support that? Thank you, Angela.
Thank you. And the second question actually leads neatly on from that first one. So if we're to tailor the curriculum based on the unique attributes of each pupil. What new skills do our teachers need to develop?
I think the first thing as I said, I wish our teachers were coaches, personal coaches. You know, as a personal coach, what do? You know the student, you know and then you know resources. It's okay, they can combine them. So we call personal coach, and that's understanding other people. And a resource curator is, oh yeah, you know, you're interested in this. Here, I got some information for you. You maybe get on YouTube to study this. Oh, I have this opportunity. You may be able to participate in this. And then I want also our teachers to become really what I call project managers. When students are doing well, you encourage them. When they're not doing well, you try to bring more support. When they're doing too well, you want to tell them, maybe that's not great. You know, just really managing, providing feedback, and also constructing learning communities. And I've written a lot about this in different books and different articles about teachers. I think the teaching job, which used to dominate our teachers' life, is becoming much less important. I've worked with schools. Many teachers ask their students to say, do you think you need me? Do you think you know the stuff already? If you show your syllabus to them, some students, well, I already know that. Some students, well, I can learn on my own. And then you have a few students who learn from you. So I hope our teachers would move from a teaching machine to a human educator. The teaching machine job can be done by reading technology and others. And we need to become a human educator who cares about the growth of other human beings.
Thank you for that. How would you respond, therefore, if a school were to say to you that whilst the idea of students playing a more active role in directing their own education sounds fantastic, achieving this may be difficult in the context where here in Wales, for example, schools are preoccupied currently with introducing a new curriculum and dealing with the day-to-day practicalities of managing COVID, which is where we find ourselves at the time. So how would you, or what would you say to somebody that put that forward to you?
Well, if you believe in this, that's the first thing. If you have the courage to do this, if you believe in this, we've seen many schools doing this globally, but not educational systems. And there are many ways to do this. One is that, for example, what if you created something outside your system for those students who are not benefiting? You know, that is, if your students are disengaged, they don't want to come, they're bored, they're not benefiting, why don't you create something different? Just for those students, you know, don't touch the ones who are benefiting. Or you could say, okay, what if we tried, it's a Friday. If you look at your curriculum, if you ask your teachers, a lot of times they will tell you they don't need to teach everything. And COVID actually has taught us that, you know, during the remote learning, many teachers said, well, I realized I did not have to spend all my time teaching that. You may be free, let's a whole day, one day of a week. Allow students to pursue their interest. Or you could create what I call school within a school. That is, you know, just create a school for those who are interested, who are willing to do this, just to do something. I'm not a person who is interested in imposing change on everybody. I think every innovation should be an invitation, not an imposition. So you want to bring innovation to a certain type of people, then others might follow. But if you try to impose on all teachers, all students, you're inviting resistance. So, you know, I'm really getting old not to want to invite resistance. So I've always encouraged to say, let's start with the ones who wants to do it. I bet every school you will find a few students, a few parents, a few staff members who wants to do something different.
Thank you for that. There's been talk in Wales recently about reforming the length and the shape of the school day. Do you think that a longer school day could help to facilitate you know, the curriculum that's more tailored to pupils' needs and encourage more sport, music, those sorts of activities? Do you have any perspectives on that?
Well, it all depends, right? You know, you can have a longer school day and still do the same thing. So that and also, if you have a longer school day, you could be depriving some students who have a good family background of the opportunity, because schools are not necessarily better than families for some children. So I think it's all depends. If you know you are serving students from low-income families where they don't have access to those experiences, longer school days definitely help. And longer school days definitely allows teachers and schools more opportunities to interact with the students. So it is definitely possible. I'm not doing policy research on school days. I'm really trying to say, okay, just doing with what you have, you can create a difference. I think longer school days can help if we try to move towards this direction.
Some really good points in there as well for us to ponder over. You mentioned the impact of, you know, the COVID pandemic in relation to pupils working remotely and more self-directed learning being encouraged. Do you think this period of disruption will have a significant and permanent impact on the attitudes of teachers and pupils towards how learning takes place, or do you think it's going to be fleeting?
Well, it always depends, right? When I've been, I say you can be a weather forecaster. That is, imagine we don't do anything. How would COVID affect education? I think it's going to be very minimal if we didn't do anything. Because now in the US, I see a lot of schools very eager to return to school without reflecting on what COVID taught us. But at the same time, if you are a group of active educators and policymakers, if you want to rethink what the future can be, you could reinvent education, especially in Wales. I mean, you're a small country. I mean, if your government is interested, I would love to see the government to say, what can we do to reinvent using COVID pandemic as a base? And there's a lot of lessons we can learn. A lot of students enjoyed benefit learning online. A lot of students enjoyed and benefit organizing differently. I think this is a great time to rethink. I think the future of education should be a combination of online and face-to-face, and combined with community involvement. I think schools, Wales, I mean, I would love to see Wales getting engaged in a redesigning of the education system, rather than just to say, let's get back to schools to be, you know, I've always cautioned schools, when you're returning to school, you might be returning to the same school, but I hope you're not returning to the same education.
Thank you. As those thoughts are percolating through, the questions are still coming and the responses are still coming quick and fast. So I'm going to hop over now to one that's come in. It says that I note that Finland scores well in confidence and PISA scores. From my experience, their diversity is built into their system, which accords equal status to vocational and academic scores from the outset. Do you ascribe this to the fact that they follow good educational ideas, or is it something else?
Well, it's always challenging to talk about Finland. I'm sure you had a Pasi Sahlberg talking to you about this. I'm a person who really believes in local cultures and local context. And Finland definitely, from all the measures, seems to be doing okay. But at the same time, I think it's a lot to do with the culture. Finland is a boring country. And if you go there to say, so if you look for diversity, man, I go there, you know, it's every country has its own culture. So what I would like to be interested in is to say, okay, Wales can develop its own unique cultures, and as a small country, make a unique contribution to the world. It can become a new global center of something. And so this is what we call talent hotbeds. If you look at it, like why South Korea suddenly become a country, produce a lot of female golf players. They're so good because there's culture involved. So I think education is both a reflection of your culture. It's not an isolated phenomena of simple policies. So you got to talk about parents, communities, and your past tradition, and then use that to reinvent the future. We want Wales to be unique, independent, to have your own views. So I think designing your own education is very important. You know, we can learn from other places, but borrowing is actually very problematic. You know, I actually wrote an article about this. I said, you know, was joking about this, like England learning from Shanghai. So what is this? Learning from math, and it won't work. It has not worked. You know, it just basically brings something to ruin yourself. I think you need to reinvent.
Thank you. You sort of approached this a little bit in your answer to that previous question, but another question goes a little bit further and wants to know, does student confidence come from parental influence?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I have not done too much research about confidence. The confidence is a very interesting concept. And because you have this ignorant confidence, which is called arrogance, you have a real confidence that is, you know, you're getting to become better. And cultures definitely affect that, but cultures is intertwined with education. You know, so like in the, you say, okay, in Asian cultures, they want you to be not confident, but at the same time, jobs want you to be, you know, real jobs want you to be confident today. So how do you deal with that? Parents definitely have a strong influence on confidence, but parents can also destroy confidence, because a lot of parents will say, yeah, go learn this thing from school. If you're not learning, you're not good. You can destroy that. So it's quite interesting. I don't think I have a really ultimate answer about this. I'm really exploring this to say, how do you help people to become confident? Which actually is another point. You know, like in education, we say, I want to give children this opportunity. Nobody gives another person's opportunity. Opportunities are created by children. You know, if a child says, myself, I see some outside, then I say, oh, there's an opportunity in that for me. And that is different. You know, when we create so-called opportunities, we may not be creating opportunities for all children unless they see it. That's not different. That's different. So, you know, life is quite random, but out of randomness, children can see something for themselves. They can see an opportunity for themselves. So that is a kind of different than trying to say, okay, we prepackage opportunities. We can prepackage experiences, but we don't prepackage opportunities.
And it's quite a skill for a teacher to be able to hand over that sort of power to a child, really, to take those opportunities and to identify them and to run with them. So I think there is, you know, there is learning to come out of these conversations, and it does involve us creating new ways of thinking, maybe as well as teachers. I've got some questions now around the international connections that you've spoken about, and you talked about releasing a world of exciting connections. Our question has been posed: what's the role of PISA in all of this, do you think? And why do some countries consistently score highly in PISA tests?
I just wrote an article. I said 2 decades of havoc. It's quite a summary of criticism of PISA. I'm not a supporter of PISA. I think PISA is probably the worst invention in the 21st century for education. It distorts education outcomes, and it actually is backwards thinking. You know, it's like, for example, it excites you to learn from Singapore today, but what got Singapore so far was done 30 years ago. So what are you going to do? You're going to look back another way? So I'm not really fan of the PISA at all. I hope actually in Wales you can completely drop it. Don't look at it. It's not accurate. It's not scientific. It's a good marketing tool. PISA is marketed very well, but it has really no bearings. Some countries do well because they're good at taking tests. You know, I've joked about, I said Shanghai is probably the Waterloo of PISA, which I wrote, you know, an article for Professor Alma Harris. So I don't think PISA plays any role. PISA extracts things that does not apply to other countries, and PISA extracts things that can be against itself. I have written a lot. If you're curious, you can read on my blog or my articles about this.
I'm sure many will. I've heard PISA described as the Coca-Cola of international tests as well. So, you know, I think that will probably, the offer to go to have a look at your blog and articles will be taken up by many of our audience participants this evening. Another question, how can engagement be improved in the classroom? Quite straightforward.
Well, very simple. Actually, very simple. If you can help each student find something that they're interested in and they're good at, you know, this is why I've been encouraging schools to say, you don't have to pretend to discipline students. If they're engaged, they're disciplined. And that is very important. But how do you get engaged in anything as adults? Something you're interested, something you're good at, and something you can become better at. So that is, I think, in education, if we put our curriculum in the background, we ask our students, what would you like to do? What problems would you like to solve? And it's very hard to do that because our children, after certain grades, they've learned how to do school. And in that process, they've forgotten themselves, their interest and their intentions. And so we need to recover that.
I've got some questions coming in on the back of the Singapore question. We use Singapore maths in our school as Singapore at the top of the PISA test in maths. This has limited success as there is a different future of education in Singapore to Wales. What are your thoughts on how we can change the curriculum, but not the home culture or lack of parental support and expectations in learning? So I think people are acknowledging that sometimes the culture's not right. What can we do to improve that?
Well, I think, you know, if you're doing Singapore math, by the way, America in the 1990s, not from 1995, did a lot of Singapore math, you know. I'm not sure, you know, Singapore math is the right thing or a good thing or bad thing. It doesn't really matter because any kind of curriculum, as you've seen there are so many different math curriculum, is that again, you need to think about the students. Some students are very used to the type of math Singapore does. Some students are much more with problem-driven math. You know, there are different ways of doing this. So I would really encourage teachers, I'm hoping in the government, you would actually diversify this. It's again, work with the students. And plus, you know, a lot of the skills and knowledge we try to teach in K-12, it's not that important. You know, you can learn if you become very interested after you become adult. Yeah, I think it is understanding the educational outcomes of schooling is important. And like, you know, not so much whether you can calculate, but really, do you have developed mathematical thinking? You know, I said I was not so good at math, but I do statistics very well. I do computer programming very well myself. I think, you know, from a mathematical point very well. So it's think about what is it that you're trying to teach. And of course, you got to think about what, you know, to go back to PISA, what are we testing? So I think, you know, understanding your students, starting from them, that was really important.
I can see that somebody's dropped a question in about, you know, if not assessment, then should we encourage people to access universities and follow their passions without the need to regardless of their grades, in order to pursue their interests. Have you got a comment on that one?
Well, it's already happening. Like I said, in the US, it's dropping. Over 1,800 universities in the US have said, you don't have to submit test scores. And those test scores have been racially and economically biased anyway. Right? This year, I was looking at the data yesterday, over 70% of wealthy children still submit test scores. Less than 30% of poor kids submit test scores. So this is actually very interesting. And universities are redefining themselves anyway. And also at the same time, to these children, a lot of children do not have to follow the idea of, elementary school, middle school, high school, college life. A lot of children are experiencing life in elementary school. We got a lot of children become big stars on TikTok, on YouTube, on doing their own thing. Why can't we more children doing similar things? And learning has escaped from schools. Schools have two functions: certify your learning and provide opportunities for learning. But opportunities of learning have run away from school. Schools are there to certify. And if the certification, which has been inflated anyway, credentials have been inflated, it doesn't really matter. How many college graduates don't have a job that fits their college majors? So there's a lot of changes that's happening, but schools have typically not in the lead of those changes.
Yeah, I understand that. Oh, my lights have gone out. Can you please give some advice on what teachers could do as first steps, and how do school leaders encourage our teachers to change the lens that they view on education to the approach presented here this evening?
Well, I hope that, first of all, teachers, like I said, are human educators. We need to think about ourselves as unique individual human beings. What makes our life more interesting? Because a lot of teachers are bored, are tired, are burned out because they're teaching the same thing the same way for 30, 20 years. I think our teachers need to say, okay, I'm a human being and I am working with other human beings. So if we change ourselves into a more professional responsibility as ourselves, that is, we are there doing a moral job, a job that's to help others instead of a bureaucratic job that we're given by a government. We might change that. In our daily practices, really just trying to build a relationship with students and understand them and treat them as humans, and just back up a little bit from our curriculum, from what we have to teach this week and next week, really trying to create a chance for our students to become themselves.
Thank you very, very much. I think we'll leave it there. We could probably go on for at least another half an hour with all the questions that are coming in. We will, of course, collate them and we'll share them with you. And if you want to provide some response, to us via email, I'm sure we can attach those to the webinar when it goes online as well. So can I just thank you very, very, very much for your very thought-provoking lecture this evening, and for your willingness to engage with our audience's questions this evening. The big takeaway is children as creators of the future. Creating a happy retirement for us all, I think, is a delightful image, and a very good reason for us to be supporting that in itself, without the endless opportunities that will be opening up for our children as well. You spoke about the unique greatness of the individuals that are entrusted to us, and they are able to create the jobs that they desire rather than to go out and find one. Lots of very, very thought-provoking thoughts there for us to take away. So thank you so, so much for your time this evening. I'm going to turn to Welsh for a little moment now, and just to let all of our panellists, our audience this evening know that bydd Cygar yn gyrru ffurflen adborth i bawb sydd wedi mynychu'r darlith heno, a bydd y cyngor yn defnyddio eich adborth i siapio digwyddiadau y dyfodol. Felly byddwn yn ddiolchgar iawn i chi petai chi'n medru cwblhau'r ffurflen a'i ddychwelyd ato ni. Os ydych chi'n berson gyfrestredig, mae ein tîm ni wedi paratoi templed i chi ar eich pasbort addysgu proffesiynol neu y PLP, fel mae pawb yn nabod o. A bydd hyn yn prompt i chi i adfyrio ar y digwyddiad heno. A os dim ond eisiau i chi logio mewn a chwilio am siarad proffesiynol ar ein gwefan. Also, why not, whilst you're on the EWC website, sign up to our journal and our book club, Meddwl Mawr, which this month features one of the books that Professor Zhao has referred to this evening, which is Teaching Students to Become Self-Determined Learners. We hope you'll pick up that. You'll have seen from tonight's slides that preceded the lecture that we have a number of exciting events over the coming months, beginning with a masterclass with Dr. Lynn Sharratt, a Twilight webinar series starting March the 1st, focusing on the teaching of Cynefin and the diverse history of Wales, and also a keynote speech from Professor Ronald C. Dahl. So you can find out more and register for those events on our website. So just once again, thank you to all of our colleagues here at EWC for the work they've put into preparing this evening for us all. Thank you to Professor Alma Harris and Swansea University for bringing the absolutely insightful lecture forward and for introducing us on the Wales stage to Professor Young Zhao. Thank you ever so much. Diolch yn fawr.